Wendell.
Hey, you fish freaks. Welcome to podcast episode number 80 of the KFO show, brought to you by the Wendell Fishing YouTube channel. If you haven't been there lately, 1,500 videos, daily shorts, daily community posts, weekly podcasts, the one you're listening to right now, and 1 to 2 videos a week, just pushing 11 million views. Guys, I'm excited over the weeks and months to come. I got World's Worst Fishing, Creek Fishing Adventures, Henbager and Lures is going to be on next week. I got Dalton Albright, Fishing with Gramps, Bearded Paddler. I just locked in Garrett Wade. We have a ton of guests over the next couple months, so make sure you tune in and make sure you hit that subscribe button. But tonight, folks, I got Ryan Matylewicz. I think I said that right. I've been practicing for the last few minutes as he shared it with me. He's in the green room right now. But Ryan was introduced to me along with his story at the Hobie BOS at Santee Cooper Lakes in Clarendon County in South Carolina that took place November 6th to the 8th. And this is the first time Ryan has ever told his full story publicly. So if you feel like you have heard it, I assure you, you have not, right? And so we're going to be giving a little backstory, but I want to just bring you kind of in the conversation really quick, right? So this has to do with a potential duplicate fish that in return won first place. I made a few calls, some people in the industry who I thought be awesome because they've judged bass for decades, and asked them to come on as subject matter experts. One of those individuals, Chad Hoover, originally accepted and then declined and made the suggestion to actually reach out to AJ McWhorter, the tournament director for the Hobie BOS. And he made the introduction. AJ got back to me and he said, hey, due to the details of the situation, I'm then able to commit to speaking on it without checking with company management. And then I followed up yesterday, and he told me that company management said, we will not be commenting on this. So that kind of leads with only hearing what Ryan has to say, which, Ryan, welcome to the show, brother. How you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
One, insanely jealous of your backdrop right there. I want a wall of first, second, third place checks and shiny trophies. My goodness. I'm impressed.
Yeah, I got to preserve these ones because ever since I had my little boy last year, my tournament opportunities has been significantly decreased. So.
Yeah, I bet. Well, congratulations on the kiddo. That's awesome.
Thanks.
So we're just gonna hop right in, right? I want to hear a little bit of your kayak fishing career to date. Obviously, you've been doing it quite a bit, right? And have found a lot of success in it. So just walk me through how long you've been doing this. Those look like a lot of KBF checks. I also see some Hobie Bass Open Series trophies in the background. So walk me through.
KF stuff. I mean, I got that one that I really had fun with last year. It was sad to see them go, but Elite Kayak Fishing, they had an awesome Northern Trail going on for a while up there. And that AOI trophy up there, I got that the day before my son was born. So that's probably the most important one to me up there. And that was a really special one. But my wife wasn't too happy knowing we had to go in for the birth of her child. And I was fishing about 4 hours away the day before for a tournament, but we locked it up, made it happen, and made it to the hospital, and we got the baby. Everything went good. So I started fishing series tournaments probably, honestly, I don't even know now, 5-6 years ago. The very first, I do know the first event I ever fished was a Hobie BOS. It was the Open before the Bass Open Series or whatever. It was the Open on Kentucky Lake. Okay. When they did that. And it was weird. I kind of stumbled into kayak fishing. My dad and I always fished ponds and did random things. And my dad had a really good friend who passed away that was like my other dad, that they kind of hung out every weekend. They hunted and fished together, did stuff all the time together. It was just his real good pal. And I didn't know how my dad was going to handle that. So I went and bought 2 Hobie kayaks, actually. And we decided to start kind of fishing locally and doing this other stuff. I heard and read in some magazines about these tournaments that were going on, and that's where I found out about Kentucky Lake and ended up down there. And that while I was down there, I saw all this KBF shirts and people that there were KBF clubs and all this other stuff. So that led me into the KBF world, and some of those events were closer to home for me up in the Northeast. So I ended up fishing the KBF series. And didn't really do well at first, didn't really know a whole lot about it. And I just remember for a year or two, I was just really trying to get like a top 10 and get one of those paper checks. It was like super important to me. And then something clicked, I kind of figured it out. And I mean, I'll be honest, I mean, it really helps with, I was one of the very originators, I think probably one of the first to have live scope on my kayak. And I kind of figured that out really quick. I mean, I got that the day it came out. I was on actually an ABC News story when it came out. I found a truck that was sunken in a lake that was part of a crime scene. That
really?
Yeah. So, but anyway, that really helped. And I started figuring that thing out, and man, it really changed my tournaments up. And I really did start figuring out bass and not necessarily just using it to look at them and catch them, but really started to, as someone didn't know how to fish these big lakes, started to figure out where they were at, how they act, what they chase, what they're doing, and just gave me a lot of insight to be able to start winning and doing better and really getting a better understanding of tournament fishing.
Yeah. All right. So we know a little bit of history. Let's hop into the juice while everyone's sitting here. Over 122 people on right now, by the way. Pretty awesome. Set the stage for me, right? Day 1 through 3, Tournament of Champions, Hobie BOS. This is down on Santee Cooper Lakes. Set the stage. And what I'm asking you to do is I'm asking you to rip, right? This is going to be the story, folks. This is going to be what happened day 1, day 2, day 3. He's going to walk you through, obviously, an appeal process, what that looks like, what the formal responses were. Obviously, doesn't agree with it for a variety of different reasons. We're going to let him share that story. So, Ryan, take it away.
Yeah, so trying to be quick with the whole tournament aspect of it, I ended up going down to the Santee Cooper chain of lakes. Never been there before. Did really well at Murray, but never went to Santee Cooper. Got down there and absolutely sucked at practice. Really wasn't finding anything. Every day of practice, I was getting a fish or two. Wasn't really just able to find a way to catch them on sonar. I caught about 50 catfish. And lots of big catfish too, like this half the size of my dang kayak. And then just wasn't happening, man. So going into day 1 of the tournament, I really wasn't thinking I was going to do anything. I had no high hopes, no nothing. I went to one area I caught them decent in, and I caught like 1 or 2 in when I say decent. I got there first thing in the morning, said, well, here's what's going to happen. If I'm going to catch something, I'm going to catch something. But I thought this was going to be one of those deals where I didn't even have a chance, and I was just going home after day 1, And they just happened to be busting on shad. So I sat in that spot and just continued to catch the crap out of them as they were busting on shad, just throwing in. You'd see a bust, you go throw in, catch a fish. And I happened to catch like a freak. I think it was like a 23 or something on day 1.
It is a freak.
And I think, yeah, you have photos too. And then after day 1 of the tournament ended, I think I was standing in second place, like 97 inches, something like that. But I had a 19.25 in my bag. And I was going through my photos, and I know when you're catching them like on top water, you're catching one after another. So you don't really know what's going on when you're taking pictures at the time. So it was all like kind of blurred together. And when I was looking through my bag, just like I always do at the end of the day, I noticed that the one, to make sure I couldn't gain any inches, I actually ended up doing the opposite. I found out that the one fish that I submitted that was a 19.25 was actually only an 18.5, and its tail was raised.
Is this the fish I'm showing?
That'd be the top photo right there. So I submitted it as 19.25, and it was accepted and scored as a 19.25.
Same tournament.
Same tournament, day 1. Yep, that was in my bag. So you look, and that 18.75 was in my bag on day 1. That 19.25 that I had is obviously the same fish. Those two are the same exact fish. So it was approved and accepted throughout the tournament. I called AJ at the end of the day. I said, hey, man, I hate to do this, but I mean, it's the right thing. And I made a mistake. I said, I looked at one of my fish. I submitted it. It was an 18.5. I submitted it as a 19.25, but its tail's raised a little bit. I mean, you approved it and it's accepted, but it's not the same fish. He said, oh, really? Okay, let me check it out. He looks at it. He's like, yeah, no, I didn't even see anything wrong with that. You're sure it's the same one? I said, yeah, it's the same fish. Here it is. I sent it to him. He's like, well, if you're telling me it's the same fish, and that's what you want to do, we'll go ahead and get it removed. Thanks for your honesty.
Okay. You're like the
I was second place, 97.
You're policing yourself here on your own tournament.
Yeah, day 1 I docked myself a half an inch.
All right. Keep the conversation going. Yeah. What happened next?
We get into day 2 of the tournament. Again, going back to the same spot. I'm thinking I'm fishing a spot like the size of like, I don't know, man. After day 1, probably like the size of maybe like a Burger King parking lot, Oh,
wow.
So it's not real huge. And I expanded a couple areas and during the day and just didn't really find as much good stuff. And I ended up finding like 1 or 2 decent spots on day 2. But day 2, I get back in the water. I get out there. I said, man, I caught that big fish. There's other people fishing around me in that area too. And they had decent days where they were still like in contention, but I only got lucky with that big fish, right? I had that 23 that really jacked my bag up. So I had no expectations of that happening again. Day 2, Same thing. I had another mediocre bag, caught him, but I just got a freak. I don't know. I can't remember how big that one was, but it was a decent sized fish. It was a 20 something. And it jacked my bag up, and it actually ended up taking me into first place for day 2 at the end of the tournament. So
Okay.
the tournament ended. I went back in. AJ sent me a message, said, "Hey, want to hop on live?" I said, "Sure." I got on live, and I'm like, "Guys, you're like, no high hopes here," because like I'm like stepping into some shit basically. So day 3, I had like, again, same thing. I was like really trying hard just to keep myself calm. I really didn't think I thought like maybe I'd still have a top 10, but I'm thinking, what are the chances of this? Because again, other people were in the area fishing the same kind of stuff and they weren't getting the same result, and it was just luck, really. There was nothing specific. I was just getting the right bites. So day 2.
By the way, I'm looking at your wall. I don't think it was just luck, folks. But keep going. Sure, Ryan. If you believe it's just luck.
Yeah, day 3, I get over to the same place, right? And it's real foggy, and super, you can't see anything. So I was hearing the fish blow up, but I was visually chasing them down when I was seeing them busting on shad, and I didn't catch any of them. And I couldn't see where they're at. So I just heard them bouncing, couldn't find out where they were at, what direction. Eventually the fog finally broke. And I caught a limit, but it was like a bunch of like 17s or something like that. Like it wasn't a huge bag, and I wasn't getting that big bite, which I wasn't shocked at this point, right? Because I'm thinking that big bite was just like a lucky kind of catch every day. So I'm still fine. I'm chilling. And going through the whole thing, I know this one spot I found fish that looked like fish on live sonar, and I wasn't able to get them. This is like the end of the day now. I got my bag, but it's like mid 80s. And then I end up going to this one spot with the last hour. Tournament boards offline, and I think at the time I was like in like 3rd place, and I needed like whatever it was, like an inch or two to take over the lead from Ewing. And I ended up going to this spot, and I saw the fish in the bushes and on live sonar, and I got him triggered on a like a 110 jerk bait. And
Okay.
I ended up getting it. It was like a 19 something, but I got it in, and whatever it was enough that it would have put me in the lead by a 1/4 of an inch before the tournament leaderboard went offline. Now look, that's the last hour. A lot of these dudes are hammers. A lot of them catching it. I didn't think anything of it. I said, yeah, cool. It is what it is. But I mean, I'm happy if I get like a 6th or 5th or 6th place here. I'm thinking like some people are going to be putting some stuff in. You know what I mean? And whatever, went home. I said, that's cool. I caught a fish. I did all I could do. Is what it is. I mean, I'm not whatever. If I do well, I do well. We end up going back to the weigh-in. Leaderboard's offline this whole time, so I have no idea what is happening. We go through the whole process. It turned out that Garrett caught 2 upgrades in the last hour, and he ended up with first, and I ended up with second. And then the whole thing was all good. Everybody was celebrating. Everybody was happy. This also then went into the whole process of their Angler of the Year race, which I only fished one event, so I wasn't involved in at all. Okay. But so they started giving out like, which were ridiculous prizes. So props to them. I mean, they're giving out like Newport vessel motors and fish finders and graphs and all kinds of really awesome prizes. I'm like, damn, maybe I should have fished a couple more events. But they gave all those prizes away, all that other stuff, and took photos, did all their stuff. And I mean, it was late at this point, so we went and got some Mexican, and I was celebrating, having a good time. Everything was fine, and went home to the Airbnb, passed out, and had a 16-hour drive back to Pennsylvania in the morning.
Oh gosh, brutal.
It's a long ride. With the baby, So I got my little boy in the car. So we had to like a lot of stops and all that kind of stuff. So it took a lot longer than normally it would, just being me, So finally that night, it was the night after the tournament. Looking through the leaderboard, I see this thing, and I had some chatter from amongst people, and I looked, I said, just whatever. And I looked at this thing, I said, holy shit. I said, this is the same fish that was submitted. I at first felt horrible for the whole situation. I said, oh my God, this sucks. Like, this really sucks for Gary. Like that was my first thought. I said, like, I don't know what to, like, I'm like, let me just send it to a couple people I really trust. I sent it to a couple people that judge fish, and some people that were just friends, and said, am I crazy, or is this the same fish?
Right.
And they said, dude, that's 1000% the same fish, amongst the people that kind of were already chattering. So I said, oh crap. So that's when I kind of started the appeal process. I basically I didn't do anything. Obviously I've known AJ. We've always been cool. AJ's a great dude. I don't have any, there's no problems, no personal beef or anything. I mean, he's always done well by me in that regard, and then we never ran into confrontation, but sometimes friendships and stuff, like things like this can happen, and it's unfortunate for the situation that we put ourselves in with tournament directors and anglers, so but anyway, so really I sent this message to him
before you take off. So for those of you who don't fish tournaments, shutting down the leaderboard 1 hour before the end of the tournament, when did it come back on for everyone to see?
I mean, for me, I didn't know, because I wasn't really focused on like I had to look at this, so it was the next day by the time I had a chance to look at it, but it wasn't till after the event.
Okay, got it. All right, now walk us through some of the details that no one else knows. Everyone kind of knows that happened. This is the stuff that
no doubt. Yep.
no one
So
knows.
yeah, everything was good. I mean, I went to at that point I basically shot a message to AJ and said, I can't remember honestly. I think I just shot him a mess. I called him actually. I said, "Hey, do you have a minute to talk?" And I called him just because I didn't want to. I said, "I think a duplicate fish was submitted." I said, "I'm going to send it over to you. Let me know what you think." He's like, "Okay, I'll review it." And then it was turned over to text message. So I sent him the fish. He said, "I can see the similarities. I see what you're talking about. I have to look at this. I need you to understand that due to the timing of this, it creates some complications for us." That was my response.
Due to the timing, the tournament's ended. We already handed out the prizes, handed out all the AOI points, and reshuffling checks and stuff. Is that timing or timing like business timing? Like there's stuff going on.
I mean, that's basically all. Like leaving it up. That was just the answer I got. So, however,
not a good timing. It doesn't matter what it is. All right.
So you feel me though? I mean, it could mean that, right? It could be all that stuff. But I mean, that I didn't get that answer. I got that the timing isn't good for us for this situation.
Okay.
So he's like, "But I'm going to send it up and then we'll work on it and we'll get back to you." So that was basically what I went to bed with that night.
So now you're waiting. So you you consider that your formal appeal to get it started.
Yep. So he said we're going to look into it, and basically it was just we're working through, and then basically that was it. They were the text messages that I got that night, and then I didn't really sleep too well because I was like obviously all torn up over this thing, like what's going on, what's happening, what's all this transpiring, and that's when, I mean, obviously there's a whole list, which we could be here and I'd gladly make it public of the official responses. But essentially then it gets into the
how many days go by until you hear back? I mean, I'm sure I'm assuming.
It was I think it was 6 p.m. the following day, I believe, is when I got a message saying that they're still working through it. I actually have the official messages right here. I'll read them so you can know. Yeah, so it was that following day.
Okay.
And basically at that day, he sent me a bunch of text messages saying that they're working through it. Ultimately, they wanted to back up the right ruling that they had already, and that there is similarities and differences. But ultimately, at best, we missed this when it was the best time for us to work through this.
Okay. It's interesting. I just heard someone time in. Sounds like Zanger's making stuff as he goes. He's literally reading from notes and correspondence. So
yeah. And for anybody worrying or hesitating about any of this stuff, just for full transparency of these responses, I'm going to post the exact responses from AJ and from this, so it's full transparency, because I want to kind of stop here and pause. This is exactly why I'm coming live to talk about this. Realistically, would I like to see Hobie do the right thing and make the right overturnment and do this? Oh, that would be fantastic. But I do have to be a realist. Do I think that was going to happen from this? No. But what I do think, by bringing to light some of the struggles and challenges amongst the kayak judgments and the kayak community, we can do better, and we can make improvements and make rulings and make stuff full transparent so that people can not get this wrong in the future and people don't have to struggle with this type of thing. So to continue, basically ultimately we want to, this is, and when I'm reading this right here, this is AJ's response, which you can verify afterwards. Ultimately, we want to get this right.
Nope, it froze on me, folks. See if we can get him back here.
You good?
All right.
You all right?
Yeah, I think I might have had some issues with internet. Now we're back. All right, keep rolling.
Okay. Yeah, so basically it was just the message I got before I got the formal response. These are just text messages from AJ. I basically got that the timing is a big concern and that they need to get through this. And then he basically then responds that he doesn't think it is malicious, which he's like, I know you don't think it's malicious either, which is very clear in there that we didn't challenge that we think anybody was cheating or anything. And that's all going to be viewable for everybody to look at. He said, I believe there was a witness, but it's not uncommon for a fish to get caught 4 hours earlier and for that same fish to not look as healthy, and then saying he's getting biologists involved as well. So he's saying that the damages to the fish is not basically something that we can determine to differentiate it from being two separate fish, because the same fish could be damaged from being caught later or from whatever, from net, from battling, from fighting.
Okay.
So then we basically I get a text message saying that I sent out the ruling in an email. So then I get my whole ruling in the email. And basically, again, I can read it verbatim, but if you get through there, but I'm just reading some bullet points and you guys can view it. And I'm going to make it so he sends it out to everybody. You can read the whole thing. Says that the fish originally wasn't flagged by Hobie. They didn't notice this in their standard 15 fish review. And it was not questioned as a duplicate.
Okay.
It was brought to his attention 24 hours. He reviewed the fish personally and brought in a panel to help. He brought it to Garrett's attention. Garrett said that he believes it's a different fish, and he sent back pictures that he took. Then this morning he reviewed the process, sent it to other tournament directors. He actually said he sent it to 3 tournament directors and has communicated with them all day. And he said that was all the photos and everything used as well. Okay. And then he said he's also asked questions, but he couldn't have answered with 3 different biologists in the region to gain a better understanding.
Okay, so we got TD's biologists. I've heard of a lot of things. I've never heard of
biologists. Yeah, but he said everything is just like he wouldn't list anybody's names or any contact information, or everything is just also, I'm just getting, this is what he's doing. So, and then I get basically that the angler caught the fish 600 yards apart, and that the timeline scenarios basically in the biologist and everything he comes up with in the markings in the app, although they came to a 50-50 consensus, that the people that reached out, they had a split panel and a split decision amongst everybody. They weren't 100% sure. So they didn't overturn the ruling because they needed 100% confidence to go ahead and overturn the ruling.
100%, huh?
That was the answer.
That's quite the measure.
Right. So
how do you even get 100% from a?
And again, I know that was not. I'm reading through this, and again, you guys can read this afterwards when I post it. I'll put it all up in public, so you guys can read it and look at it any way you want to and take it how you want to. I'm just trying to read the stuff that is just stands out here.
That's formal response. This is good. We don't want speculation at the moment.
Yeah, so it's really, rulings are split. Okay, number one, the way I take this, and saying it's 50-50%, and AJ says verbatim in this thing, it's quote unquote, there's similarities and there's differences. I could fight this either way.
Okay. What happens next?
So basically it's just 50-50%. Okay. So that's where we're at this point. And I mean, I can talk about what I think about that, but let's just stick to the whole thing and get through it. And then we'll kind of open it up. So then he basically says this is the best they're going to do, and they're going to stick with this decision. They're going to keep it. He's sorry if he makes it feels wrong, and that it is normal, and tournament directors do get stuff wrong. And I understand if you don't agree with this decision, basically. It was what it was. My response basically saying I do disagree with the decision. This is my email response back. And again, I basically say, obviously I have a lot at stake here, but as you observed, I docked my own fish. By the book, and integrity is everything to me. If I didn't 100% feel it was the same fish, I would have never mentioned it. I just want the right ruling for everybody involved. I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but something like this, I feel like a polygraph should be standard to rule out if there is any foul play. Not saying there is. Again, to clarify, I'm not saying there is any. So that's basically my response. And I said, ultimately, it's your show. I appreciate you acknowledge all the work you do and put into this already. I just ask that you truly exhaust all options and do everything in your power to confirm that this isn't the same fish and rule out foul play. And this is the email that I sent to AJ in response. I said, with the results from this being done, I would live with it. I just don't feel like it can put it to sleep because I don't think we know the whole story, and I don't see everything here, and I don't think we've exhausted all options. And there's too many similarities to this fish for us not to really look into this thing further.
And we'll get to those similarities in a minute. And so we're not there yet. We're still just walking through literally the appeal process. It went 3 rounds, correct?
Yes.
And we're at the end of round 2.
Yep. So then I get the message back again from AJ saying he does another review again, right? So like, he's not just like blowing me off. He's doing this whole thing. So it's going through a time thing. And then he goes through and says they reviewed it, accepted the fish. And he said, this is what they're doing again. And they're reviewing it, gone through. He says he speaks to the tournament or the biologist. So he brings the biologist, the 4-3 out biologist coming from the region. In this process, I and the other tournament directors learned that some of the things we used in the past to potentially identify duplicate fish is not definitive and accurate as we believed, in addition to them finding more differences with the fish with the fins. So basically said that, and he says it again, future, he says that no longer can we just use scale patterns because they can be part of the same spawn and brood. And fish can be twin. So everything we've used since the start of kayak fishing, catch, photo, release, you can no longer use scale patterns basically, or any kind of fish markings to determine a fish, because they can be they could be born at the same time, I guess, in the same spawn. So to me,
that's what we learned. This is groundbreaking news, folks. We just
that's what
the last 3 decades
covered. But we're going to not go public with this statement, which they also say this is what it's going to be. We're not going to make a public statement about anything. And basically we're still not planning to overturn the fish. But the reason we're making this decision and the answer to having the scale patterns be different is that they could be basically twins, I guess. I don't know.
Twinsies, folks. Twinsies.
So then it gets into we deny the whole request for a polygraph, saying they can often provide false sense of truth that still requires a judgment to be made, and ultimately we're making our judgment, right? So, and then again he goes back for the third time and says, in a sport judgment, it's not uncommon for judgments to be wrong, and there can be discrepancies and errors. I mean, so to me, basically the whole thing I get is that we're going to not overturn this fish. It was a 50-50 split panel. The biologist said that we can no longer use scale patterns, and no one could come to an answer, so we're just going to leave it ride.
Okay. So that's the entire formal response.
Yeah, well,
again, to your appeal.
I'm sorry if I did a terrible job. I'm just trying to read through the parts that were like kind of that would be something that people would be interested in reading. But again, I'll post the whole thing up so people can look at it in its entirety.
Yeah, I mean, it's a formal response, folks. I mean, this is the appeal process. Hopefully someone can learn through the process how this is all done. And like you said, your inspiration. I'd love for you to share it again. Well, here's a question for you. And then we're going to get through. I'm going to let you pick apart kind of some of the key things that obviously you don't agree with. We're going to bring up some fish photos. We're going to look at similarities. We're going to look at non-similarities, and we'll give kind of feedback on that. Why now? I've heard some chatter out there. This event took place early November. And so why? So
yeah, I guess we cut it off early. That was the last email formal response, right? So at this point, I kind of this is when I went and conducted my own investigation with reaching out to tournament directors, reaching out to everybody that I basically had faith in the kayak community, including national trail organizations. During this discovery process, I even met somebody that I was talking to that was involved as one of the outside judges in this particular case.
Oh, they're one of the people who got called. You found out by accident because you're both friends.
Well, actually, I ran into 2 people that were called. And then the one that was involved in the decision-making said that it was him and another individual that he works with at his organization that were involved in this decision. And he felt horrible about the whole thing. But he did let me know that him and his other colleague voted that it was the same fish. So the 2 that I reached out to were in agreement that it was the same fish. I reached out to other organizations that also spoke. Well, I said there was another individual. There's 3 in total that were in contact with Hobie, and all 3 of them that I spoke to, the only 3 that I found in this discovery project, they all said that it was the same fish. So the ones that were saying it is a different fish, I have no insight on this. It's not disclosed to me. I don't know anything. All I know is that everybody that is a trail leader and everybody in a national trail organization, everybody that I've spoken to that I have faith in, has gotten back to me with it is the same fish.
Has anybody been like, Ryan, I gotta have a hard conversation with you. I don't think you're right here.
No, and that's it. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm talking. That's why I'm bringing this to the light, is that I have not found anybody without bias that has said that this really could be a different fish. I have not spoke to one person that truly believes without bias that it's the same fish. Everybody I've spoken to has said that it's the same fish. The ones that say it's not, through general public forums are pointing to items such as cut fins and tail fins that have cuts in them, that we just don't use as a standard in kayak fishing typically to identify fish. It's always been scale patterns. The exact situation here was down at Lake Murray at the Bassmaster event this year. And this wasn't on the same day even. This is 2 separate days. My buddy Jake was down there, and he was fishing somewhere near the money. And he got a call from somebody, and he caught a same fish that was a duplicate, but he caught it 2 days apart, one on the first day, one on the second day.
There's the photos.
Now, obviously, you can see that there's like a very shocking dorsal on the fin there. You can see there's some markings where they look pretty similar and everything. But the markings that were gone off of on this photo were the beauty marks and the scale patterns and the dots and the unique structures of the scales. And that's what triggered the review. And they basically ended up sending him a message. He sent the message out to us. We looked at it. He sent it to some of his other friends he trusted. They said, "Sorry, bud, you're beat. It's the same fish." He said, "Damn, same fish." Yeah. So then he basically said to the tour maker, "Yeah, no big deal. This sucks, but what are the chances I can do this?" And he caught that fish I think it was 200 yards apart. One was in like 26 feet of water, and one was in like 4 feet of water. It was moving up into a rock, getting ready, probably pre-spawn.
On the move.
Yep. But it does happen,
Yeah. So question for you. Out of all that response there, what are the things that flagged as suspect for you?
So just going through, I mean, kind of like I had some of the bullet points. I mean, the timing, which Hobie mentioning the inconvenient timing for them 3 different times in their formal response. I mean, timing's irrelevant, right? This is something that it was not my fault that it was missed. It was nobody else in the leaderboard's fault it was missed. It was missed in the initial scan. So the timing to me is not relevant. I mean, whatever has to happen of that, I don't understand how that has any kind of relevancy in it. So obviously I understand for them, there's a lot involved. As you mentioned, you have to redistribute checks. You have to do all of these things. You have to send trophies, all these motors, all these items, all the angler of the year. Like you have to redo this. So a logistical nightmare on top of a financial strain of having to pay for all that shipment and all that crap, not to mention the controversy of going back and saying, "Hey, we got it wrong. We missed this." And then kind of coming out and saying all this stuff. And it's just a bunch of public fire that regardless of what they're going on as a company, it's not something that's going to look good on them, especially with them at the time struggling to try to keep the Bass Open Series alive. It wasn't going to be a fighting thing to bring up saying, "Hey, look, we'd really like to keep these events. They're great, but by the way, we screwed this up." Right. It wasn't really a good selling point. So that's just saying what it is. So to say that there's no bias and just kind of hoping this goes away, that's not really truth in the whole matter.
So for them to mention it 3 times in the formal response, like it shouldn't even be considered as a factor.
Right. And then the other thing that bothers me is, right, like, so the tail fish, right, like my fish that I docked on my own was basically just looked at. I was like, "Oh yeah, I don't see anything wrong with this." After I bring it to AJ's attention, I mean, it should have been an immediate, "Oh wow, yeah, no, you're right, I see it right away." But it wasn't. It was like, "Oh, it looked good to me. I approved it. I didn't see any problem. I guess I can see it." Like that was the message that I got, and it's just not right. Like these are things that should be caught. I mean, because if I had 3 fish like that, and I just let them ride and didn't dock myself, that would have won the tournament alone right there. Like it's just, these things can't be missed when you're playing for $25,000. Like it needs to be more critical than that. Right.
Well, really quick, it's not just $25,000. I mean, I that's the first place prize purse.
Yeah.
Right. And I know you're sponsored. I know there's sponsors out there. I believe Old Town, and you didn't tell me this, I sourced it myself, is that you'll get, if you win a first place, you get a free kayak up to $6K. And then your other sponsors. And this really could catapult your career. I mean, the difference between a $25,000 and I think the $7,400, right? That's the difference here. But it's a lot more than that, right? If you're in this business, you're trying to ascertain sponsors. Literally, I just put together a resume. A company wanted a resume, and one of the things they wanted on the resume is your accolades, right? Yep. And so this stuff's important. It's how careers are made. And so this is why this is more than a $25,000 potential mistake. All right,
No,
keep
that's
going.
right. I mean, it's a trophy, right? So the trophy is the big thing. We fight for that. It's the biggest event in kayak fishing. That's how this is promoted. It's like it's not just a small regular miss up between 7th and 8th. Like, I mean, this is the biggest mistake you could potentially make in kayak fishing, being it's the biggest event in kayak fishing, right? And it's between 1st and 2nd over a duplicate fish. So, I mean, it doesn't get any more large scale than that, right?
I mean, do you even have more room for trophies behind you? My
Um,
goodness.
But I mean, that's just it, man. I mean, if it's just me getting second place, like I've had lots. I mean, there's a whole shelf of second place trophies there, I think. But it's not about that. It's about what's right is right at the end of the day. It's not just me getting moved up in the leaderboard. It could be other people getting rearranged, and the right outcome is the right outcome, and that's really what matters to me. And there's many people that know me that would tell you that's the truth. Now, is the money great? Obviously, that's great. And I mean, for a lot of people, it is life changing. I'm blessed in the sense that I have my own business. I have multiple different properties. I have a lot of stuff going that gives me the ability to do things. So it's not going to decap it, like not going to completely cripple me that I don't have this money. Like it's about principle. And that's why I'm kind of here talking about this as well. Is there's a lot going on here more than just the money, right? Sweeping this thing under the rug doesn't make the dirt go away.
Yeah.
If we're talking about something such as no longer are we able to use scale patterns to identify duplicate fish, but we're not going to go public about this and make it known, man, that is monumental. That literally completely ruins kayak fishing and catch, photo, release. It doesn't exist anymore, because if we have to be 100% certain to disqualify a fish, then every time I go fishing, I can catch, or a cheater, anybody that wants to cheat, anybody can go and catch. And again, not somebody in this particular tournament, but just as a whole, this is big news, because now you just go catch 2 fish and you cut a fin or do something to those fish, and there's no way to be 100% sure, because I spoke to biologists. The only way to be 100% sure of a duplicate fish is by bringing it in a live well. Like you can't be 100% sure. You can only use your best judgment based on everything that we've used since we started in this sport, is looking at the scale patterns. And if 99% match, it's the same fish. That's just been the standard. And if we're not doing that now, and that's not the case, now all of a sudden, like, then what are we doing?
Yeah. What is the new standard that apparently was discovered and communicated to you? There's a new standard. There's some things we can't lean on anymore after speaking to these biologists in this scenario. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, what are we going to do, right? So just I mean, the last thing we do is, like, I don't understand what the whole, like, I don't understand what creates all this buzz and negativity about, like, oh, we can't talk about something, we can't we can't throw shade. Like, how is it throwing shade other than just stating like a formal response of your experience fishing in an event and speaking to the outcomes and how it was dealt with, and trying to bring to light some of the things you didn't agree with and what you think you could do to bring back something else to the sport to make it so it's not so negative going forward and it's more open, which I have a couple things that I will get into that I would think we could do, right? So number one, let's start with, like, leave the tournament board online, right? What if we don't take the tournament board offline? Now all of a sudden, there's everybody following the whole tournament has a chance to catch some of these errors and some of these duplicate potentials to maybe help with the inconvenient time scenario, where it can be caught before the award ceremony, right?
Right.
And then, like, why, like, let's just start there. And then if we are saying this with, how do we not come to light with this? If we're saying that scale patterns no longer identify fish, then what? So we have to say what does, right? Like, what is the new standard? How are we, like, these kayak tournament directors need to come to the light and say, this is what our process is. This is how we're going to look at fish. And this is how we're going to identify duplicates. Because if that's an unknown, you're going to be right back to where I am. And then someone else is going to be dealing with it, which if I come out and say this stuff and this buzz and the controversy and whatever, and it creates a bunch of people talking and hype, if nothing else comes from this other than a new rule that someone is able to take advantage, like a new rule comes to play where someone else ends up with my situation, this rule saves them from having to deal with that, then it was worth it for me, right? So I just really think we need to figure out what to do to make this sport better. And I don't understand how the perception is that by not talking about it makes it better.
Yeah. And you get some of that. I mean, I don't know about you. Have you ever seen a group of people get it wrong on anything? Or you ever see 5 people get it wrong? 10 people? 100 people? I've seen freaking nations get crap wrong. And so to not challenge it, live in the freaking United States of America, folks. just because a group of people and we disagree with it, we get to disagree with it, right? We just don't have to go shut up afterwards.
Yeah, and I didn't, and everybody is like, obviously the duplicate fish thing has been the buzz that everybody's talking about and all this other stuff with the challenge and the appeal process, the whole thing. But like, I came to kind of talk about this fish identification and like what we're going to do and kind of bring this image here to how we can make this better going forward. That was a lot of why I made my initial post, which if you read it from Facebook, it was very vague. It just said that I was late because I was dealing with this stuff. With my post, and we cut short. I actually I had a phone call just last week with 3 Hobie executives just to show you that this was still continuing to go through. That was then again recapping with my discovery process and the individuals that I spoke to. The call ended up basically being short and just that they were going to continue with their same this original decision. And that's when I let them know and I give them a heads up, like, well, hey, listen, I don't think a lot of stuff is okay here. And I got to like try to figure out how we can make this better going forward. So I'm gonna, I have to go public with this. And I made that known prior to making my post.
Yeah. All right.
So
anything else flagged for you in the midst of the formal response you received from Hobie?
Just the judging, right? The whole judging, it's just shady. Like, I think in just straight up going forward in all of kayak fishing. And I mean, I know a lot of times they don't want to get involved. They want to try to eliminate the controversy, but open doors, like it basically eliminates all that for you. Just full transparency. All these people that are fishing these events, like it should be known that I challenged a duplicate fish from Garrett. Garrett said that he thinks that the fish is the same. It should be known that these judges are being involved with the decision-making process. These biologists are with some names, and like they should have votes, and it should be shown on paper, like who's actually saying what's being done, and then it's all done. There's no controversy, there's no negativity. Everything's being said in the clear and the open, and the general public has their chance to look at the ruling and make their own assumptions and choices instead of like throwing this stuff again under the rug and just letting it for like the rats and the mice in these underground forums to sit and like nibble at for like content and create controversy. It doesn't help the sport at all that way, in my mind.
Were you ever? It was never disclosed to you who these judges were, tournament directors. I honestly I don't think I've ever heard of biologists being brought at 3 wildlife fishery biologists brought into this. And who are they? Have they ever judged the fish? Did they know $25,000? I got so many questions. This is the reason I asked Hobie to be on the show, and they said we are going to decline to comment. But these are some of the questions I would have loved to ask. I was going to have them on right after you. And here's the thing. I will still have them on. If they're like, hey, we still want to come on, I will create a space, an entire show just for their response. And so I will throw that out there. All right. Anything else flagged for you?
No, man. I mean, other than that, just kind of like I said, it's just they're just the big deals, and like again, we'll post out there the formal responses and stuff. People can pick through them, but I just think we need to make some clear standards here. And the biggest goal coming off of this, before we even look into the fish and these duplicates here, is, and for these tournament directors to look at. And again, my mission will be accomplished in the sense that if we can kind of come out and make an announcement on some clear practices that we're going to be using to identify fish, especially if the truth is that we're not going to use scale patterns anymore, because other than that, I don't know what else there is. Unless we have to take like core samples or something of the fish to take back with us. I don't know.
Fishing with Gramps had a question. He asked, Wendell Fishing, any evidence that a biologist was consulted, presented to Ryan?
No.
Okay. Other than
just the email.
Trust us. We're doing it. Got it.
Yep.
All right. Good question. Trying to find some other questions here. It's hard to keep up with the conversation. And let's just go over here. All right, let's take a minute. Let's head into, let's take a look at this thing, right? So I decided, you know what? I took a look at it. I was like, oh, obviously, and I've asked some people. I called up Chad. It's like, Chad, you've been judging fish, and he's on right now. You've been judging fish for freaking 3 decades. And he told me, it's like, I was literally driving down the road, and I was just zooming in on my phone, and I would have judged that a duplicate fish. I called someone else up. He's probably asked him, how many fish have you judged in your life? He's got paid to do this. He's like, probably 100,000. He's like, not a chance. That's not a duplicate fish. Right. So I'm talking to people who've judged hundreds of thousands. Those people have talked to people who have judged hundreds of thousands. I have yet to hear somebody tell me, right, who have judged hundreds of thousands of fish. That is not. Right. That is not it. They're 2 separate fish. I haven't heard that yet. So let's take a look at some of these photos. I took painstakingly, took a bunch of time earlier today, and started zooming in and started circling some things that I found. Right, this is the work that I did. So these are the two fish in question. Right now, I believe the fish on top was caught second. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yep. And the fish on the bottom was caught first. All right, so let's start taking a look. Obviously, you got the length is spot on, but that's kind of neither here nor there right now. Just looking at the similarities, right? Just looking out. Now, granted, even the color is a little different because the lights throughout the day. Obviously, when you stress fish out, they can change colors, but there's an obvious pattern, a light pattern in the middle of this fish. Moving on, you have scale patterns. So this one was kind of shocking to me. So when I zoom in on the scale pattern, the similarity here is insane, right? You got dark, dark, dark scale, light, light, dark, dark, light, dark, dark, light, light, light. And then you got this, the line kind of stops, and now it's creating a cluster of 4 or 5 scales are kind of out of order with the line, 2 of which are smaller on the bottom, 2 which are larger on the top. And you go to the fish below, the exact same. Dark, 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 light, light, dark, dark, light, dark, dark, light, 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 in that same bundle. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 things that are identical from one fish to the other. The odds on that is astronomical, folks. Absolutely astronomical for that to be the one fish to another. And we'll show you. I actually put together, I think, 6 or so fish caught at the same body of water during the same time, just to show you how different bass look here in a minute. Continue to go through. Obviously, there's some damage. I don't know what happened to this fish when it was younger. Maybe a blue heron kind of went after it. There's the same damage from one fish to the next. You have up just under the dorsal fin. You have this kind of double snake bite thing going on. The 2 light marks. See if I zoom in on that. 1, 2, 1, 2, exactly the same. You go down right next to it. You kind of got this L-shaped scar on both fish. Going back toward the tail. I'm looking at this thing. I was like, this looks like a freaking flower on the back of this. You got these 4 scales in the middle is this little white dot that is identical from one fish to the next. Then you keep on rolling, and some of this stuff is like, wow, underneath the jaw of this thing is a little like scar. Once you zoom in on that, you can come and see it has like an indentation on it on the inside, kind of marking on both of those. Like the odds of that's insane for both. Let's take a look at the anal fin, just above the anal fin. You have this almost like Pac-Man looking scale, eating another scale on both. And then 3 scales over, you have this unique marking, identical from one to the next. So the odds here, right? Looking at all these things. The odds here of a fish caught in the same lake, caught with the same person, with probably 20 plus indicators of same scale patterns. Guys, that is just straight up astronomical to have that and it not be the same. Unless you believe in twin fish, which I do not. Never seen it. But any thoughts on that, by the way, Ryan?
No, I mean, you hit it. I mean, and then they brought, I mean, there was some other one, someone sent me a message with a fish that was a picture of them that Garrett held up, I guess, from the other side of the 2 fish.
We got that. I got it. We got the other side of the fish, folks, which you typically don't have in a tournament. Here it is.
And that all lines up exact as well.
Yeah. I mean, you got the birthmarks up here on the gill plate, gill flap up here, very distinct. You can look at the patterns. Now, on the flip side, I feel like this is where a lot of people will fall into the camp of it is 2 different fish, is down here at the bottom. See these little cuts. And so how do you explain some of the, like all the yellow or the kind of the discrepancies, all the red are the same in this particular photo. And so how would you explain that? Because those are different from one fish to the next.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just like AJ said, it's not uncommon for a fish to be caught second to have more damage to its fins or its body, essentially. So that's damage, right? It wasn't born that way. It's not instinctual. That's actual physical damage to the fish. And you can still see, if you look at those bottom little yellow arrows and you kind of look at that little tiny strike up above it, that's the same on both fish. And then also there's that one that's circled red to the first, right up to the right above that. Those in the fish where their picture where they were both on their side, one of those was missing. So that was kind of one of the things they were circling. But you can tell by looking in that photo that is therefore intact. So it's just fins are kind of like claws on a cat. They can move them and they go in and out. They move them all different angles. And then the rips obviously can't be there. But the rips, if you look on the picture of the fish on its side, you can clearly see them kind of both there. But the fact of the matter is that the scale patterns, as we know, don't change, and that's just been the standard. But the fins can indeed get ripped in the net during the catch. They can get anything could happen to them.
Yeah, did you fight that thing through timber for 30 seconds? I mean,
like if I went and committed a murder or did something, and then they caught me on video and I had 2 legs and I chopped a leg off. I mean, they could still pin me through my fingerprints, right? Like it's still the same thing. Just because you lose something, it doesn't change you as a whole. So it's just a piece of the fish that was damaged. It's not an actual verifiable print on the fish. And that's something that's always been told to me that way through all the tournaments I fished. And every time I've ever had this come up into question, I've never, ever heard of anybody look at the fins. Maybe as a quick acknowledgement to see like if it is exactly the same, kind of like Jake's fish. I look there to see whatever, but then it immediately goes into the body of the fish and lining up scales. And if you can get all those scales matching up like that fish, you can get 100% of the scales lined up. Like you put that thing and zoom it up and put a layover on top of them, every single scale lines up on that entire fish, including the damaged ones. And that's not something that is done through birth.
Right. And you sent me a Flickr thing. I tried to upload it and it just would not upload it. These things go back and forth. I'll see if I can post it on my platforms tomorrow. But just so if you're not tournament fishing, you're just kind of in here, just listening, learning about it. These are 6 fish caught during that same tournament around the same size, right? All kind of the 19 range, just so you can get an understanding how different bass look, right? And we add these 2 in there. It's just interesting, right? It's not like they all look the same, right? All bass look the same. This is very, very distinct. All right, so decision's already made, right? Hobie made the decision. You went through 3 appeal processes through it. They're not going to change it. And so now let's talk about the things. How can we be better, right? And that was the whole inspiration behind this, right? Obviously, you don't think the right decision was made. You wanted a platform to be able to share why you don't feel like the right decision is made. You still have a lot of questions that have yet to be answered. That aside, what are some things now, right? So I got a couple of things we can chat about. Of course, everyone, I already saw some of the comments, is shutting down the leaderboard is a terrible, terrible idea. Catch, photo, record, release. Would that help? I've heard people say hands-off photos for very clear judging. I know that creates a lot of issues where, bass like to flop around. I've had some jump out of my yak. Polygraph. So there's a variety of different things we can chat about here. How can kayak tournaments start mitigating risk so stuff like this doesn't happen?
Yeah. So personally, right, let's start with, if we're going to talk about polygraphs, I mean, I don't know why we mention them in the rules if they're never being used, right? So they just need to either kind of be clear with that. We're not going to use them or we're going to eliminate them, because in a situation like this, I don't know why you wouldn't use it as just a standard, right? So it's just, if you're 50-50 split on a decision and you can't overrule it and all the scales line up, why would you not say, like, to try to use this just to rule out any potential other wrongdoings? I mean, not accusing anybody. Why would you not use it as a standard? If you're not going to use it for a situation like this, when are you going to use it? And if you plan on not using it, as they mentioned, they don't trust them. I don't know why we list them in the rules. That's just my take on it. But other than that, I mean, we need to really, big thing is groundbreaking news that we just talked about, right? Saying that fish could be twins. So how do we move forward on this? If you can't identify fish by scale patterns, like when we look this up, I mean, so I've seen some people in the comments saying, like, how do you not, if you line up every single scale on the fish and they all line up and there's not one scale that's out of place minus a cut fin, and that's not good enough, what is good enough? And that's on 2 sides of the fish. we don't ever have two sides of the fish. We only have one.
Right.
Right. So these tournament directors need to say, we're either going to do this, we're behind the scale pattern. We think this is going to be like, this is verifiable. We can use this. Scale patterns are good. They don't change. We need to use them as our identification cause of catch, photo, release, and that's it. Or we're not going to use them. Not that it's been good up until now and now it's not good. Like, that's not acceptable, right?
Right.
So we need to, first of all, come up with what we're going to do, if we're going to use that or not. I mean, I would like to see Bass coming out saying, hey, for duplicate fish purposes, we are going to accept, and this is how we're judging, and this is what we're looking for, just so the anglers have an idea of what to expect going forward, because if we're not going to use the scale patterns, then what do we use? And then if we're going to use, like, look at cut fins or like that, or damaged fins as an identification, then like, how do we know, like, if it's after the fact that the one is damaged, how does it stop like the shady people of the world from intentionally cheating?
Sure. Cutting fins, clipping fins, stripping
yeah,
fins.
There's no end here, right? So these
I did a video on this. 11 ways people cheat in tournaments. They literally will cut the fins, mutilate fish.
Yep. And then, so first of all, I think that's really the biggest thing, is like, let's bring some clarification as to how we're going to do that, right? For this specific scenario, how are we going to do that? Now, as far as the other ideas with the judging to make this stuff go smoother and delete the controversy, I see people saying, oh, this creates negative light, blah, 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 blah. But these are all things that need to be addressed. And we need to have, I think, full transparency that we talked about, bringing to light everything and making sure it's open and making it a full open process, so everybody knows the whole thing of what's going on while it's going on. It just creates a better image for everybody, and it deletes the ability for people to get into the shadows ahead of any kind of statement and getting out and just throwing their own spin and shade and creating controversy and putting a bunch of negativity out there to try to stir up the pot. Because everybody already knows what's going on, so they don't need to do that, because everybody sees that right from the source, right? So transparency on judgment, I think, is huge. But the biggest thing, and then unbiased judging, right? We need to take friends and like take people out of it. Like, I know a lot of parties do that where they're only judging with external judging, but when we're trying to judge in-house, obviously a scenario such as this, you can't claim non-bias when you are the one flipping the bill to send stuff back out and rearrange trophies and send things out and do stuff, and you are the one responsible for doing that. That's not unbiased, right? So
literally the definition of conflict of interest.
Exactly. So that's something that should be very well avoided. And I think that these tournament organizations that are outsourcing, which most are, from my knowledge, are kind of doing, and they have outsourced judging. To my knowledge, I thought Hobie did too, until this event, when I realized by all the stuff that was being missed that that wasn't the case, such as my fin up in my fish. And I had a fish at Cayuga, same thing, that was accepted, and it didn't even identify her in the photo, and they didn't even tell me about it till the end of day two, and it was accepted and green checked and everything. So someone either said something or complained about it, and then it comes back out. So it's just there's things that are missed that shouldn't be missed. And when you're dealing with outsourced judging, they do a much better job than localized internal. And there's nothing in it for them to be biased about.
Okay.
Because they're getting paid, right? They're not flipping the bill to change things around, or they're not worried about their image of a mistake. I mean, it's just they have one job, and that's just to judge fish.
Yeah, and I'm curious, is there I've been doing this a while. Is there and this would be one of the questions if they would agree to come on the show, what is your process, right? Because I know I talked to Chad, and I was like, Chad, what is your process? And he was like, I'll be honest with you, once a formal complaint goes in, I can't even chime in on it. It goes to a board, it gets assigned to this person, it gets assigned to this person, they put it together, someone else leads it, and then the verdict is given to me, which I then repeat. And so there isn't any type of conflict of interest there. And so he kind of keeps, I mean, he'll probably explain this a whole lot better than I am. Nonetheless, when I asked the question, there was a clear answer, and he was very upfront with me on how this takes place. So like, oh, that makes sense. And when a consensus isn't reached, you have to then win by 2 votes. It wasn't just 1 vote. And so it was all thought out. Obviously, he's been doing it for decades. But I was hoping to get Hobie on here and ask him the same question. What is your formal process for a complaint like this, right? For a formal appeal? Were these people pre-selected? Right? Hey, when this comes through, I'm reaching out to you, and then you got to reach out to these people, and then we're going to call these biologists that we have in our, and they know we're going to call them, and so forth and so on. I just don't have answers for that. I wish I had
Yeah, I
answers
mean,
for that.
like for me, I don't like it's a split decision here, and that's what the message I get. It's a split decision. It was a tough one, but we're gonna stick with leaving it alone.
So you're saying during the appeal process, they're saying, hey, we did all this. Everybody who got back to us that we asked, it was still 50-50. So they leaned into their original because it wasn't 100%. So it could have been 75%. Is that what they're saying? And it's still,
Yeah, I don't know.
you don't know.
I mean, and all I can tell you is like accidentally, like without them knowing, and through partying, through like me having knowledge, like having relationships with a lot of people, I was able to uncover two of those people that were involved, and they both told me they voted that it was the same fish. So now that makes it even worse for me because I'm thinking like, okay, so if these two guys did, they reached outside, so now it's just internally that they're voting that it's a bias. So who else? How many people did they have involved? Totally. And if these two people think that it's not, so now it's an in-house thing. The Hobie's saying that they think it's the same. The outsourcing is saying that they don't think it's the same, but they're going to stick with their internal house. So what was the point of reaching out the external? I don't understand.
No, these are the questions I have. This is why I invited Hobie to come on the show. And if you're just hopping in late and you've been following the whole entire time, they declined to comment. All right, moving on. A few other things. How do we get better, right? We talked about polygraph, and not even particular this particular scenario, just polygraphed in general at a certain prize purse amount, maybe not. Hands-off photos. What do you think about that as a potential standard? It's pretty extreme.
Yeah, I think it's really tough, right? Because I mean, it's just, I mean, people are going to be in there fighting for a while. I know I've heard about it brought up in the past, and like I think Chad had it in KBF. They kind of talked about it, like video, like they're doing the video fish, and the challenge there is one, the vial sizes, submitting the stuff for the video, and then as far as the hands off fish, like the mouths being open and like trying to keep their mouths closed
It's
while they're
tough.
on the board, like, and how do you keep a mouth closed up against the bumper and keep its tail finned out and like try to get it to like where its actual length actually is without having a hand on it? I mean, I'm totally fine personally with the hand like on the center of the fish, kind of with it up against the butt board, but the hand over the tail, that's some of the best identification marks to see that it's the same fish, right? So I really don't like the fact of covering up the back of the tail. I think that's covers up a lot of important data so you can use in the fish identification process. But obviously we've come to learn that I don't know much about fish identification because twins happen and that doesn't matter with scale patterns. So whether that's, again, where we go back to, we got to decide if we're going to use scale patterns or not. That's the ultimate here with
Right.
everything, or else that hand placement, everything else is irrelevant, because the whole purpose of hand placement is to like be able to see enough fish to identify whether there's a duplicate or not, right? Not to mention that with being able to put your hand over the tail, there's been people in the past that cut tails and move tails and do weird things along those lines. So, which is, I don't know who does that to a fish. Like that's like some really deep mental issues with that individual. You know what I mean? But yeah, I think that we start by having a standard as to how we're identifying these guys, then come to keep your hand off the tail. I think just sticking where we are, I don't think you can fully take your hand off a fish. I think you can take a backup photo, right? I think that may be something important. You put your hand on your fish, you take your photo, and then you're required to take your hand off and take another photo of the fish prior to its release. Right?
Honestly, I do that anyways. And usually if I get a nice, good photo of my hand off the fish, that's the one I'm submitting if it's not blurry because it jumped. I understand why some people would believe that fixes the problem because you have more identifiable information to look at, but it creates a host of other issues. I agree.
So, I mean, and again, really most of this stuff, and like, I guess to Chad's point with the video, I think it's fine, right? So like, if you take this make this a standard process, I mean, yes, it takes more time when you, especially if you have spawning, or like you're like I was doing, I was catching fish on top water and I was trying to get that fish in and out of the boat as fast as I possibly could. It makes it like hard, but I think it's kind of, we come up with a standard to how we're going to base this. You put your hand on a fish, and I think it's for angler safety that you take a photo of the fish afterwards, right? And then if you want to do a video release, and now you have proof if something does come up in controversy that you can say this, and you say this is what's going on. And as Chad's mentioned, I think in the past, if there's something brought up and you don't have that information to supply, then that's just negative for you. And if you can't provide that information, if a challenge comes up above one of your fish, then you don't have it. So it's just really one of those things that you wouldn't necessarily be required to submit, but you would have it if you were to be challenged. And if you're asked for it and you don't have it, then that's just less information for the judges to use for you, but it all comes back to, again, we have to look at how we're going to deal with this new information. I think that's the biggest highlight of this whole thing, is that needs to be answered.
Right. So if you're listening, we got over 200 people listening right now. By the way, if you have not hit that like button, please do so. Helps get to some extra reach on the replay. But I'd love to hear you. If you're listening in right now, same fish or not the same fish, go ahead and put that in the comments. We'll get that going. And the final thing, I think it's the biggest thing. We haven't really talked about it yet, right? Shutting down the leaderboard. Thoughts on that?
Shutting down the leaderboard is 100%.
Why do people do? Why do tournament directors do it? Just for the suspense?
They try to build up the suspense for the anglers at the event of coming into the weigh, and I think a lot of it was originally done to get anglers that may have not know if they were going to be in a check cashing spot to come to the awards to support the other anglers, because a lot of times they cash, if they don't win, they're out on the road and they're taken off, and they don't go to support the other anglers. So I think that's done in favor to try to create hype at the event and make more of a celebratory thing for the anglers while they're there. But it's crucial time to where you're able to see the top 10 prior to them going up on the stage and challenge stuff, not only for the anglers, but for the other people involved, all the people watching. You get 1,000 tournament directors essentially looking at fish, looking and analyzing, looking for something that's wrong with a fish, that can basically open up a lot more lies on something to bring to light prior to going to judgment. Where this fish, in my mind, based on who I've spoken with, it 1,000% would have been identified, and it was something that would have been brought into his attention. And now, if this was brought into the attention due to messages, would it have been overturned because it was convenient? I don't know the answer to that.
No, we don't. All right. Got some of the votes in. Now I did something over the last 48 hours. I just posted out there, just kind of for the everyday angler, just taking a look at it. So not people who judge fish. I was just curious to see what their response is. So I threw this out on the Kayak Fishing Freaks Facebook page. So if you're not on that, you should head out there. And there we go. Let's hear your thoughts. Is this the same fish? Yes or no? Had 200 as of 10:43 this morning when I was putting this together. 250 people voted with the thumbs up or laughy face, and then over 304 comments in this post. I mean, this post went 26,000 post reach. All right. We have 166 people said yes, same fish. 83 said no. Then 2 people were crying for some reason, the cry face, and one person just loved it. So interesting. And this came from, there's a couple of comments here. Seth said, hey, I have no dog in this fight. You can't compare fins. Fish can easily move their anal fins and make it appear like they're different fin shapes and edges. You need to compare the scales was his point. And so let's take a look at a ton of comments coming here. All right, let me see. Oh, wow. All right. Same, 100% the same. Fishing is a lifestyle. Same. I'm trying to look for something. Same, 1,000,000%. Same. My goodness. I don't see a single person, and I'm looking through 20 or 30. I don't see it. They're all saying the same. Chad Hoover, 100% Christine. I'm not sure what Christine said. But nonetheless, there you have it, folks. Well, Ryan, anything else? Anybody have any question for Ryan as we kind of land this plane a bit? I think we went in a pretty exhaustive hour and 10 minutes of how this thing all played out.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just, the story's out there. It's kind of brought up, I'm ashamed with how some of the people handled it and brought it out to light without giving an opportunity to speak on it. And that's unfortunate, just because people just jump on anything, I guess, these days with social media to try to create controversy and say things. And again, I truly can say with 100% integrity that I really came out to light to say stuff and talk about this to make the sport better, to get discussion going around what we can do to avoid having this happen again to somebody else, because it was absolutely a horrific experience to deal with. I mean, I lost hours and days of sleep over this. I was sick to my stomach. I couldn't eat. It was horrible, just because I felt duped. And I just think the wrong decision was clearly made, as everybody in the comments sees as well. And I just really hope that the tournament directors take real observation of this, and they're able to come out with something to say, hey, one, we're going to definitely use scales, or 2, we're not going to use scales anymore. And then also prevent or promote some sort of transparency on how we're going to judge stuff and move things going forward, and kind of keep that open. And as far as I know, I will actually go out to say as well before we end this thing, that through my research, I do still feel confident fishing KBF events. I still feel confident fishing Bassmaster events. I spoke to some of these people, and again, I'm not trying to get involved with anybody, but I feel that the judgments would have remained with the fish being disqualified on both of these trails. I don't have a question in my mind, just from past experiences with Jake's fish, and also with other situations that I've dealt with these with these particular trails as well. So kayak fishing is great. I hope my little boy can enjoy it one day.
Heck
I
yeah.
love it. I hate that there's a negative light being shown here, but at the same time, when we're trying to grow this thing and get to these purses this big and these events this big, we really, really can't afford to make these kind of mistakes, especially if we want to see this thing stick around for a couple generations.
It all depends if you look at this. I don't look at, I personally, I don't look at it as this is a negative light. Like, it's only negative if it just happens and everyone's like, okay, that looks like a giant mistake has happened, but just sweep this under the rug and everybody forgets about it and we don't get better. Right. I believe this is going to help us get better. We're asking questions about the entire state of the industry and how we judge in tournaments and these shutting down leaderboards and, appeal processes. And I had a really great question that came in here a moment ago. Didn't ask it. Hank Vegan Fishing. Ryan, was the review process clearly explained in the BOS rules? I'm familiar with their setup in that regard, and I'm curious to know. It seems like not knowing the process added to the mess. Do you know?
I'm not sure what he means by clearly explained there. I mean, it's a
is the appeal process anywhere on their website or anywhere in the rules where it's like, oh yeah, if you do appeal,
if you read through it, you're essentially going to see that there is an appeals process. You can file a formal appeal, and that essentially they'll go through and they'll review it. And I think it's basically just like along those lines. I think there might even be something, again, I'd have to refresh it and go back, about a dollar amount or something to file a formal appeal. It's been a minute since I read it, but I mean, it's a good point. But at the same time, I know I've looked through the rules just while I've been dealing with this, and there's nothing that distinguishes how or who or what or like how they're going to approach this, and I mean, obviously with this was totally off basis anyway, and it didn't go with anything in the process. They reached out to external sources and other people that they apparently use, including 3 biologists, I guess. But I don't have any verification or proof of these particular people. And again, from my understanding, this was handled as a total one-off event.
Okay.
Judging. So
no, there's been some, we're going to land this plane here a little bit, and there's some interesting comments in over here. Some people feel like it's, let me see this. Well, Mike M., the attacks on Ryan's character this week was shameful by the same usual suspects. And then Mark Edwards said, this isn't growing, it's crying 2 months later. Like, really? were you listening to that? You've been in this entire show, Mark? Insane to me. So people still have their opinions. And I guess I have my opinion as well. I don't feel like this is crying. We literally just went through the facts, the formal response. Hopefully you guys learned something along the way, right? And if we can get 1% better, right, at least think through these as tournaments across the country, we'll all be better for it. And so hopefully everyone can see that. And that was the inspiration. It's my understanding you didn't come on the show. You're like, hey, I'm going to come on the show and I'm going to get this thing overturned and I'm going to get my money. Was that your expectation, Ryan?
No, not at all.
I didn't. What was your expectation, inspiration in going in this? Because you're putting yourself out there, right?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, right? So I don't.
They've been attacking your character.
I'm limited what I can fish. I mean, I'm limited what I can fish. As far as attacking my character, I kind of made that very clear to myself going out here. I knew that was going to be the case. I wasn't going to get involved in it. And all I'm doing is coming out here stating facts, what the truth was to me, what had transpired, and how I think it was handled, and do I believe in it? And that's really it. And what do I want to have come for this? If I have, again, mentioned one person that is in a situation like me that I prevented from getting there because of a rule or some sort of clarity that they had, would make me feel that this whole thing was worth it, just to prevent this from happening to anybody else. Because again, it truthfully was just a horrible experience from start to finish for me, with this whole appeal process to everything. And just the way that I was just kind of handled, I just felt like it was very, just biased, I guess.
Yeah. So well, there you have it, folks. Ryan, anything else you'd like to share before we land this plane?
I think I'm good. We're good to go. I appreciate you for having me and all the work you put into this. And like, again, I mean, like I said, I reached out to you. I talked to you. I said, hey, bud, just take a look at this. This is the show we have, and let you see the photos. And I said, I don't want you to kind of make your decision. I want you to be unbiased about this. I want you to kind of look at your stuff. You make your own choice. And here's the situation we got here, and here's where we got, And I hope everybody out there kind of takes us to their local trails and other trails and kind of just get some clarification as to how the rules are going to be going forward with fish identification. Because I mean, God forbid, especially during the spawn, imagine how much of a mess that'll be.
Yeah. Well, I'm sitting here, you know what? I came into it. If Hobie would have came on, I was like, okay, I'd have an open mind. But after I looked at these fish myself, started zooming in, started doing all the scale patterns, all that stuff, like, yeah, I can't. I mean, I'm a bit biased in doing this show. Because I do believe that's my vote. This is definitely 100% the same fish. I think there's a variety of different explanations for the other things that you see on this fish. I don't believe there's twin fish. I haven't talked to anybody who's like, hey, I haven't heard anybody a biologist talk about it. I've had people I've talked to who've judged hundreds of thousands, 500,000 fish. They're like, I've never heard of this. But you're allowed to have your own opinion, and that's the beauty of this country. And so I know there's a lot of people in the comments who don't agree. That's totally fine. A lot of people do agree. Also totally fine. Hopefully this was bringing value to everybody who was on, agreement or disagreement alike. And Ryan, thank you so much for putting yourself out there and hopefully bringing to light some issues that we might potentially have as an industry as we get better. Folks, I got Headbanger Lures on next week, next Tuesday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern on the Kayak Fishing Obsessed Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Have a good one. See ya.
Take care.